outside the United States, in foreign countries, were what they called expendables, another charming CIA phrase. Those were people who either were suspected enemy agents, possibly refugees who didn't have any connection to anybody and wouldn't be missed if they never turned up again. In East Asia, many of the expendables were captured North Korean prisoners of war. And a number of these people, we don't know how many, did not survive the experiments. Gottlieb came to know more than anybody of his generation about how to destroy a human being. And he wrote a memo explaining how to do this. How do you cut a person off from all sensory stimulus? How do you make a person completely dependent on the interrogator? How do you make that person lose all sense of connection to anything outside the little chamber in which you've imprisoned him? Gottlieb wrote about the techniques of doing this in an extended memo. So as I discuss in my book, that memo wound up shaping guidelines that were used for officers working in the Phoenix program in Vietnam. They were used in manuals that were passed to secret police forces working in Latin America during the 1980s. And they then turned up in instruction manuals for people overseeing interrogations in places like Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo. In some cases, the phrases can be traced right back to Gottlieb. So there's a definite continuum from the experiments that he conducted in the 1950s right through to the tactics of so-called enhanced interrogation that we're using today.
Well, one of the things that struck me reading the book were the titles given some of these manuals. The Counterintelligence Interrogation, which was the Kubark manual, which evolved in 1983, I think you wrote, to something called the Human Resources Exploitation Training Manual, which is really about what?
Human resources exploitation is another word, I think, for mind control. How do you get into a person's head and manage to control that person? So although he was never able to figure out how to program someone to go out and commit aggressive acts, he was able to find out a whole series of ways that you could reduce a functioning human being into a quasi-vegetable state. Only decades later did some of his victims slowly come to realize that that must be what had happened to them. Somebody in a bar, the one with the club foot that put something in a drink and then my life was never the same again. Or I